Hello! So, I'm going to do a quick video about power scaling, mainly because a lot of power scaling annoys me. Now, if you don't know what power scaling is, it's pretty obvious from the name. You're scaling the level of power of usually a fictional character. Now, is this useful? Well, a lot of people might say, well, obviously no, and to some degree, it isn't. But I will argue that it is useful to see how do you say, uh, the plot holes or other things in the series. A lot of Let's just turn down the music. I do want to have music on, but not that not loud. You can't hear it. Okay, let's fix that. Barely audible. If that's how it should be. Occasionally, perfect. No scuff, no scuff. Obviously. Anyway, was it? Oh yeah, it could be useful to see plot holes. If, as an example, a lot of the time, fast characters should really not have been killed, right? Because they should be so fast in comparison to the other character that they shouldn't be hit. At least based on what they've shown. If a character can run at the speed of light, and the other one goes at relatively regular speeds, even if it's faster than like bullets. It doesn't make sense for the other one to hit them unless they let them, right? A lot of fast characters get badly treated in some ways, but I digress. Important. It can also showcase the times when authors really haven't thought of the numbers. If a character can lift a car and destroy buildings, like in Dragon Ball, unless they are repressing themselves, then they should not use 20-kilogram weights for training. Right? That doesn't make any sense. Anyway, a lot of the time, fighting is whoever the author wants to win will win, but that isn't helpful when you are not the author. If you want to just see how strong a character is, it really doesn't help. This just is how a lot of scaling works. If a character is stronger or equal to another character who has done X things, is a fair amount of how scaling is done. Because feats are ultimately the most important things. What things they've actually done, which some people almost ignore because it doesn't help them. But problems! There's a lot of problems, and I will probably miss a fair amount, but I'm gonna go with a few ones that I have seen a fair amount. Weird gaps. So imagine if a character regularly is shown to blow up islands, blow up islands, blow up islands, but then, like this, uh, or around that level of power, right, blowing up islands, and then in One Piece, Whitebeard, when he is old, has the power to destroy the world. This is not only one of them; it's also kind of, well, statements. And a lot of the time the problem. But this can also be a weird gaps, right? Like in JJK, where you can have this black hole like power, and this can be the case that their power could potentially destroy the Earth, but the character themselves very rarely are that strong because it doesn't make sense for everything else in the series. Black holes is a common that and statements are a common cause for this. But anyway, vague. Again with the Whitebeard thing from One Piece has the power to destroy the world, right? It's not very clear. It's kind of vague. What do you mean destroy the world? Do you mean like completely destroy it, turn it to dust and rubble like the Death Star, or do you mean wiping the civilization, or like surface wiping? What do you mean? Heck, world in itself can mean all from like a small village community to the universe. So I mean, what do you mean with world? Because it's pretty obvious that it's not the universe, right? It's a planetary, like, the civilization, the world government spans the world, so it's obviously not a town, right? They're obviously referring to that. But again, it doesn't, that does not exclude things like, again, surface wiping, or for the most, or destroying civilization as we know it, right? And again, this is not on the character themselves, it's on the devil fruit, because of the quake fruit. Anyway, not I don't want to go over everything in detail, because then it's gonna be at least 10-hour long video. With if I'm gonna go into detail about everything and talk about everything that I can come up with, it's gonna go into a lot of hours. Context again, a lot of a lot of feats goes into context, and when you're missing context, it can sound like, oh yeah, they're definitely planetary, like in this one, Mr. Invincible, when they destroy this planet. Oh, it was a big planet, so you can scale them to planetary, and he goes stronger, right? So maybe you can feed into planetary, right? That and they did blow up the planet. You can see it in the image. What's the problem? The problem is that a lot of the time that I can see, they don't mention that the planet was weakened beforehand by a laser, and that they wouldn't have been able to do this normally. And this is by 3 people for a vaguely sized planet, because I'm pretty damn sure they haven't specifically stated how big the planet is, because that is a very rare thing to say in from what I've seen. I have yet to see much when they specify how large things are when they go into planets. But again, it is a planet. Not understanding terms. You have no idea how often I have talked to people and they talk about a term they do not understand. This is, how do I say, a lot of the time with, from what from my personal experience, a lot of the time it's with terms like outer versal. What does that mean, right? And some people have their own meaning towards specific words of what that means. I will also mention it under this, maybe under abstract, I guess you could, but that is not what I'm. Were hyperbolic statements. I don't think I've written anywhere specific, but hyperbolic statements like, oh, he was lightning fast. It doesn't mean he's literally as fast as lightning. Which you have to use other things to confirm if he in fact is that fast, which is usually go down to feats, not statements. Don't use statements as proof for how strong a character is. Okay, that's very bad. It's a very bad evidence. Very, very bad. Again, don't use statements. Use actual evidence. Or feats, not feats. Omnipotent. Again, this is you could say under this same as abstract or vague. What do you mean? If a character can is so far above everyone else and has not showcased the any limits, does that mean he's truly omnipotent? And what I mean with truly omnipotent is, to put it simply, being able to do everything. So, omnipotent with true omnipotence, not a lot of other terms. Or do you base it on feats? Because a lot of the time, they have shown a fair amount of characters that get called omnipotent, or that statement, and they don't show anything. A lot of the time, infinite as well. Oh, infinite power. Again, infinite power doesn't mean that they can have infinitely level attack power. If you have a 9-volt battery with that can release out at most 9 volts of electricity, but it has infinite, but it can go on for an infinite time period, you would have infinite power, but that doesn't mean you could do anything with that infinite power, or it doesn't mean that you could do any levels higher than, well, another 9-volt battery, just lost a little longer. Abstract, this was a lot of like concepts, right? How do you scale destroying a concept? You don't. There is no way you can scale it unless there's another thing that you can scale it in comparison to, right? Like sometimes you need a level of power to be conceptual, like a god in certain series, but not always. But not always. Sometimes the just can do it. What's the limit of it? I don't know. And sometimes it's just called conceptual or some other abstract way. Again, it doesn't really mean anything when it comes to power or scaling their powers, unless it's specifically in that series, which a lot of people forget that it's not a real physical thing that you can destroy, so you can't really use it to scale any level of power. And it also varies from well, series to series. Sometimes people can just do it. It's if it's a part of their ability, they can do well, abstract things or affect abstract things, but it well, other times they cannot, even though they are immensely stronger than that. Same with another thing that I will probably mention, but it's towards speed, so yeah. Dimensional scaling. I will mention more on unknown dimensions. This, I'm pretty sure I'm referring to things like, you know, a dimension of unknown size. If there's something for sure in that you can, to some degree, um, like scale the size of, or the need of a level of power that you would need to do that, then yes, you could power scale it as a feat. But for something like, I don't know, a vague dimension that has a feat like Kaguya. How big is a lot of those dimensions? It could just be flat planes. They could be hundreds of meters. They could be infinite, or they could be very small. We do not know, unless there's something actually there that you could scale them. And sometimes, even if you could create them, doesn't mean that, well, it does, like in something like a dream world, even if it could affect you, do you require that level of power to create it or not? Because it's vague. It's not. Dreams aren't physically real, at least as far as I know. Timelines. Timelines are difficult. They act like separate universe, other times they don't. So when affecting timelines, you kind of, because the thing is, like, is if you want to use timelines or wiping timelines as like a feat of power, because like it's a universe, right? But then is Morty McFly like multiversal in powers because he changed the timeline? Because I don't think so. Pocket universe. Again, same with unknown dimensions or other things. You don't really know how big they are. Yeah, I don't think it was anything, but anyway. Let's go to the next one. Yes, this is a PowerPoint with speed. I'll mention it here in terms of time, right? Again, this is just categories that I think it should be in. It should be like a million fucking Sonic, and though it is quite different in terms of levels of speed, at at the same time, I don't think it's really matters. A lot of the time, you can't real. It's kind of strange to have peak human and then another tier before superhuman, like a three essentially like normal human, and then athlete, and then peak human, and then superhuman. Are you serious? Athletes are supposed to be the peak of humans, and I understand there's a difference. Like someone like Batman is apparently peak human, but well, there I don't think it's a large enough difference to warrant another to its own category. But I digress. It's not important, really. It's not really that important. One thing that I will speak on this is I don't think time traveling or affecting time should be relevant when considering speed, because even when time traveling, because again it's so different between different series. Sometimes when you approach the speed of light, like in our world, it slows down essentially, right? It's time in relative slows down. But other times it doesn't work like that. Sometimes you need like vastly faster than the speed of light. Like Superman can easily go from different solar systems in a moment, yet he that isn't enough to time travel. He can time travel though, but that isn't enough. He doesn't time travel from that. And a lot of the time also like while using effects for speed can be useful, eh, doesn't mean that someone without that effect isn't fast or isn't as fast, because again it works differently. It functionally works differently. Yeah, and too many categories is my main complaint. And time traveling should not be considered speed. Because also another reason for that is because of what speed is. Distance over time. You don't have any time. You do, this should be considered a hacks. Is Dio does Dio have an infinite speed because he has a time hacks? Because he can manipulate time? I don't think so. I don't think so. So I don't think it should be. Anyway, next one. AP and durability. It's mostly fine. Again, no. Did I think it's later. Again, no, no powers, no dimensional scaling. It's bad. Did I skip over dimensional scaling? No, it's later. I I wrote this at another time, but but I had before I restructured it. But I guess anyway, abstract feat again. It's not no abstract feats because again it differs from series to series, so it's kind of weird and wanky to use that without any in-world context. So on alone, right? Alone, abstract feats and alone. And if you are scaling a certain level of power internally to the series, you're just scaling him to another character or another person. So it's not really using abstract feat. What does hyper and omniversal even mean? It kind of loses all meaning. I know it's about like dimensions, but I know in actuality this is about um dimensions, but dimensional scaling is fucking stupid. I also find it like so from around star, right? With AP and AP and durability has the same scaling, pretty much. because you're scaling to the same thing essentially. How much damage can one take and one much power can one pull it out, project, I guess you could say. So just so, and between a star and a solar system, the mass of a star is like 99% of the solar system's mass. So it's and I understand. And the other ones is mostly about, well, scale of the attack. It's not really about the power. Well, it is, but if you could focus the power somehow on only the the planets and stars, it's gonna be very tiny difference, because again, the difference is in between a solar system and a star, again, is quite little in percentage wise, because again, the sun is over 99% of the mass in the solar system. I think it's like 99.8 or 99.98. I don't remember. It's very small. And again, it's not Earth. Jupiter is a lot bigger than Earth. So I think something like, and again, in between like galaxy and universe, there's billions, if not trillions, of galaxies in our universe. So even using mass is just such a vast difference. Multi doesn't really mean anything other than you're more than galaxy. So I think it should be like cluster or supercluster in terms of words, or I guess these are just semantics essentially. And I think black hole, although it does kind of have one of the problem with dimensions being kind of anyway, it can be used in certain ways. Oh, someone makes a tiny microscopic black fucking hole and suddenly there are like star level. No, that's not how it works. Black holes could fit because they can go from like, and they are destroyed, so they can go from like few hundreds to like even billions of solar masses. They can grow immensely large, so I think it fits for instead of solar systems as an in between and multi-solar system. Dimensional scaling. It's abstract, as it's you can't really. It's not really a physical. So what is there are essentially three different. So it's kind of vague in a way. Just saying dimension doesn't really mean anything. What do you mean with dimension? There are essentially three different dimensions, types of dimensions. First, it's, well, like essentially a universe or a space. It doesn't need to be a universe. It could be a pocket universe sometimes. Anyway, it's a space, right? That's one type of dimension. Another dimension could be, well, timelines, essentially, but that's the same thing in its essence. Sometimes its dimension is planes of existence, and other times it's just actual dimensions, which essentially just directions. Different directions. You can go up, down, left, or right, or a combination of them, but you in a three-dimensional space, right? Directions. Does that mean anything with attack power? Not really. If you want to go and try to explain a way that it in fact does, it doesn't. And just using dimensions doesn't mean anything. And even when it is power, it doesn't need to be infinite. Like Superman is a 3 or 4 or 5, 6, I don't know, dimensional, but those born on higher dimensions, well, they're not immune to being beaten by Superman or instead of Superman using another character, they're not immune. And you see these other times as well. Other three-dimensional characters beating four-dimensional beings. That doesn't make any sense, right? If, well, in fact, this is in fact infinitely stronger, which some use, like levels of infinites. You know how much you need to grow to become infinite? An infinite amount. Any non-finite levels of growth, which is pretty much none, pretty most of the time. So it doesn't matter if you go 10, hundreds, or even like Googleplex amount of stronger. You would still be an infinitely less weaker. And it's pretty much, and since because of the abstract sense of this and because of the vagueness, it's pretty much primarily used for wanking. Because if you could use something else, like an actual feat, you would. Again, doesn't mean anything inherently with power, mass, or anything. If you want to go specifically, what does power, power go through? Well, there's energy, right? Energy doesn't inherently have anything to do with dimensions. You can have more space, but that doesn't mean you have more density for energy. You can have less energy density. And mass is a part of, and force, well, force, physical force, well, let's say a punch is determined by mass and speed. Speed doesn't inherently have anything to do with dimensions. How far, or acceleration. It's not speed, it's acceleration, but anyway, the change of speed, uh, which is essentially, and mass, which is again energy, how much energy you're actually giving for force. Anyway, not relevant. Mass doesn't inherently have anything to do with dimensions, although I don't know how it would work in lower dimensions. Volume, which is a part of dimension, doesn't have anything to do inherently have, if anything, larger volumes would probably lead to weaker attacks because you're spreading the force over a larger surface area. Now, it doesn't mean that there aren't any advantages or disadvantages to dimensions, but it just means that there aren't any inherent in terms of power or scaling them for dimensions, at least actual dimensions. With time, it goes a bit wacky, but again, it doesn't really affect how strong you can punch unless negative punch in negative speed, which I don't know what that would mean. I don't know. Look at that. Zero time punch. I don't know what that would mean. Would that be infinite power or would that be regular amount of power? I don't know. Depends on the series, I suppose. So again, there's nothing inherently connected dimensions with actual dimensions with power, and higher planes of existence, it's vague and depends on the series. And, well, spaces, well, I guess you could destroy the space or the universe, whatever. But you would still need to, but that wouldn't really be inherent. That wouldn't be because it was a dimension. It wouldn't be get stronger. Let's continue. What is outerversal? Outerversal means, well, versal comes from space or universe. Outer essentially comes from being outside or external. So you're outside space. Again, this is a term from, well, power scaling, or from Versus Battle Wiki originally, apparently. And again, with connected with what we already talked about, does dimensions have anything inherently to do with attack power? No, so it shouldn't be a scaling for attack power. It's fucking stupid. Stop it. All of this is used as a wanking term. Oh, they're outerversal because they can go to a space that is outside of space. And then they use it against someone like Superman, which has literally done that. But I digress. It's stupid. I think so. It's not bad as a term, it's just not good as a power scaling terms. I think it should be removed. And beings that are out of reversal are typically stronger than someone that isn't, but that isn't inherently the case because out of reversal characters are usually gods, and gods typically are stronger than regular beings, but then that isn't always the case as well, and that doesn't mean that they are stronger than someone from a different series. Hacks. Hacks should not abstract feats should be counted to hacks, not stats. It's pretty straightforward. This includes time traveling. And it makes being able to hit something abstract or not being affected by something because you are an abstract being, fine. That doesn't mean you hit harder or move faster. Well, if it's something like time traveling, you can kind of go around it, but same for teleportation. That's hacks, not speed. You're not really traveling any. You're traveling an infinite, or you're traveling over no speed, and sometimes time traveling goes over negative speed or forward in time. Or less time, maybe. Anyway, it gets complicated with time traveling or time manipulation, so it should be counted as hacks, not really, again, not stats. It shouldn't be counted towards hacks. Again, why Dio isn't considered to have infinite speed. Some characters shouldn't be scaled because of what they are. Saitama is infinite growth, so he could be scaled to a certain degree. He would be above this, but he goes constantly and increasingly. So if you scale him to him, he would be vastly stronger than that. So there's no point. Also, he kind of has certain gag powers, but I digress. Uh, SCP doesn't have, well, specific stories of canon, but as a whole, it doesn't. So and so you can't really scale any because you can't trust them as having any canonical feats. And also, they could just be fucking wrong with a certain being. Bugs Bunny, he's well, a cartoon character, which he does a lot of things. A lot of things he does would refer to hacks or meta powers, but it doesn't really mean anything. One day he's average person strength. Other day he is ultra strong. There's no consistency. There is nothing. So shouldn't be scaled. For character vastly more powerful than anyone else in their series, again, you have nothing really to scale them to, and you just might assume they have infinite power, or actually truly infinite, or true omnipotence, but that might not be the case either. Maybe it is, but I don't think they should be scaled. Again, this is the case for the truth as well. He shows nothing, or at least someone like the pre-times pre-retcon Beyonder, or the one above all, which is more has feats to show them that they are immensely powerful, but the truth doesn't have anything. Uh, this is Takato Yogiri. He's from Insta Death, and his power is he kills everything, everyone, every being, and he's far beyond everything. And so, how strong is his attack power? And yes, his insta death works on everyone. You can't really scale how strong he is, right? And it kind of goes against what their character is a lot of the time. The one above all, he's God. Put him against another one who's supposed to be actual God. Who wins? I don't want to ask that. Who's stronger, Allah or Christ? Even though they're supposed to be technically the same God, but I'm not gonna go into that. Some think he is pagan. Allah, I'm talking about. There you can go probably in a lot of other characters that probably shouldn't be scaled because of what they are. Again, you could go into the feats or respect threads or like a minimum of what they can do, that's fine. But I'm talking about actually seriously scaling these characters. It's kind of because a lot of the time a lot of these characters either goes towards like meta, like Bugs Bunny, or like infinite, because they don't really show any limits, or their statements of infinity, which a lot of people don't seem to get quite. An infinite growth doesn't mean that you have infinite powers, or limitless growth doesn't mean you have infinite power. As long as that growth is finite, even if it's a finite amount at any given time. I mean, like, it might increase, like, by, like, exponential. Doesn't matter how long you go, it won't ever reach infinite, right? And that you can say is limitless growth. But can he beat? A lot of the time, these are characters that are wanked, because I think they are connecting the power of a character to their importance or how good they are. So at least that's my theory of why someone like Goku is, well, but can he beat Goku? Sun Jin-woo as well, because I think it's also, I think Sun Jin-woo is massively overscaled, at least from solo leveling. I've never seen any good reason why he should be above Universal in the original or manga or manhwa. Sorry, not manga, manhwa. How could I say that? It's so different. Just Korea and Japan. I suppose I could call them cartoon as well, but that might piss someone off. And sure, cartoons. Superman is an actual cartoon, but hey, I think this is the end. Yeah. So these characters tend to be scaled way above, and these are typically the a lot of the time they also use dimensional scaling to scale them up, from what I've seen. Superman is also different. He has a lot of different versions, although it's kind of, again, I'm pretty certain that a lot of certain people see as their strength is important when it doesn't have anything connected with how good they are as a character. Which you could argue if they are or not. I mean, I think Sun Jin-woo is a bit shallow as a character, at least later on. But, eh? You can think what you think. Don't let it skew your scaling or something like that, or other. When you're trying to be objective, try not to do that. Although it can be hard. Everyone has biases. But it often kind of makes you and others of your fandom look bad. But that's the end, I'm pretty sure. I don't think I'm anything else. I could have probably spoken about this for 3 more hours. More. Or more than that, but I'm not. Try to keep it as short as possible.